Let's bring out Ross Tucker here. His football podcast is presented by DraftKings. You can get it wherever it is you get your podcasts. And what did you find? I'll ask you in a second about the time that you were traded, but what did you find interesting about what was done yesterday in the league, the most active football day that we've seen at the transaction wire?
Yeah, and by the way, Dan, first of all, thanks for having me. Big fan of what you guys do. And just to echo what Hawk was saying, because I was in New England in 05 and 06 until I did the opposite of Hawk. I got traded to Cleveland from New England. Brady, in 18 years of playing football, I never met a guy that cared nearly as much about the quarterback center snap. Like, Dan, I'm a center, right? It's the first thing you do every practice. It's really boring. You bend over, the quarterback puts his hands in your butt, and you snap the ball to him, okay? You do it your whole life. Never play with a quarterback that cared nearly as much about it as Brady. And this is like spring OTAs. He would look at me and say, Ross, you and me, great snap first, great snap first. And here I'm like 26 years old, 27. I've started a bunch of games. But when he said that to me, I was like, okay, Tom, okay. Like, he is the biggest, like in his psycho head, and I mean this as a compliment, the perfect snap that makes like that awesome noise when the ball hits the top hand, he wanted that sound every time. Like, just to piggyback off what Hawk said, that's how much of a psychopath that guy is. He wanted the perfect snap sound every time because in his mind, that gave him like a fraction of a second more time to look at the defense or throw the ball or whatever. So everything Hawk just said, I can totally back him up on that. As for the trade, I thought Bradley Chubb and Chase Claypool were probably the two most interesting. Bradley Chubb going to the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins right now are probably like tier 2 in the AFC. Obviously, tier 1 being the Bills and the Chiefs. But I kind of think the Dolphins, Dan, looked around and were like, you know what? We got Tua playing really well. He's on a rookie contract. And if we get one more guy in here, a guy like Chubb to rush the passer opposite Jalen Phillips, maybe we could do something. Maybe we can be like the Bengals last year and go on a run in the playoffs. Maybe we're not quite where Buffalo and Kansas City are right now, but with Chubb, maybe we can give it a run for the money. So I thought that was really interesting that the Dolphins clearly felt like they wanted to go for it and that this year with Tua still on his rookie contract was the time to do it.
Don't you kind of feel like the Dolphins are putting a master's class on like being a GM in front office and what you actually do when you get those kind of picks?
Well, what's crazy, Hawk, is looking at what they've done with Tua and those receivers. I'm crazy impressed by Mike McDaniel. I mean, look, the last 2 years, the jury was way out on Tua, way out. And so what did Mike McDaniel do this offseason? He's like, all right, he's really accurate, doesn't have a big arm, but he's smart and he throws with timing and anticipation, and he's pretty good on crossing routes, middle of the field stuff as opposed to having to throw it out past the numbers. So what does he do? He gets Tyreek Hill, who nobody can hang with on the in-breaking routes because he's too fast. Next thing you know, Tua has the best quarterback rating in the entire NFL. Like that's coaching, right? This is coaching. This is front office. Look at what a player does well. Get other players that help accentuate those positives and then design plays that put what the quarterback does well with the receivers. And that's why the Dolphins offense is what it is right now. That's what's so cool. And what's so frustrating for probably guys like you and I at times, Hawk, I played for 5 teams, right? In 7 years. And I think I had 9 head coaches, 9 offensive line coaches, which is hard to do unless you're bouncing around a lot. And so many coaches just don't do that. So many coaches like, this is my system and my system works. And we're going to, thank goodness the Dolphins, for Dolphins fans at least, they got a coach that says, let's just take what the kid does best and run the whole thing around it.
Most coaches are like that. And to your point, if only somebody would have seen this in Mike McDaniel early and made this call. I did, just for everyone, for the record. Right now, it's a high stock, so I'm going to make sure I give my credit.
No, you did.
You're fitting in well. I got to tell you.
You worked with him very early, correct?
Yes. And that's what exactly what Ross said is all the things that Mike does really well.
That's crazy to me that you guys who come from this system that's so disciplined about everything, that the ego would get in the way of the leadership that way. It seems stupid to be a leader who says anything opposite of what you guys are saying. The job is to take the strengths to mask the weaknesses or help improve the weaknesses and find the strengths of the people who are your employees.
I think I've done decent in life, and I think Ross is the same way because I'm very self-aware. I know what I am and what I'm not. And so when I could look at my body of work and see someone who puts me in the best position and gives me the highest output, Mike thrives off of that. Like, he wanted to get Tua. When everybody said, oh, Tua can't do it, Tua's not this, doesn't have the arm strength, those are the things that excite Mike because he wants to solve an equation that nobody else can by going to get a ton of receivers who are incredible at yards after catch so that Tua doesn't have to do all the work all the time. He can put them in position. They do RPOs, play action, get Tua outside of the pocket. And it's not just with Tua because eventually they'll have a new quarterback. Eventually they'll have more pieces. And that's where Mike is really, really good because the X's and O's of it all. It's just if you can get an organization to get over the quirkiness, then you're going to reap the benefits, and that's what the Dolphins did.
I just can't believe that you're both saying, Ross, that this is
something that seems so obvious.
A rare thing.
No, it's wild.
It doesn't even make any sense to me.
Yeah.
You got to fit into my system.
I mean, Ross, back me up here. Now, I want to get your input here, too, but the majority of NFL coaches I don't want to say they're not trying to win, because everybody wants to win. The more important thing for them is keeping their jobs. And so you put yourself in a position to always be able to blame the other person. That's work 101. We all deal with that no matter. You leave enough ambiguity to make sure you can blame it on someone else if it goes bad and, give yourself the credit if it goes good.
Hell yeah.
That's 99% of coaching. So,
and what's really funny about to me, Hawk, is that most of the systems these guys run, they're not even necessarily the best system. It's just a system they learned.
Yep.
You know what
exactly.
I mean? Like, it's not even like this is the system we should be running. It's just this is what I know. This is what I learned. Now I'm the head coach or now I'm the coordinator. So this is the system we're going to run. And then they spend 2 or 3 years trying to get players that fit their system. But in the NFL now, if you're not good in 2 years, you're done.
Mm-hmm.
So they never even get it. They never even get the guys that fit their system because they lose so much the first 2 years. I thought it was interesting. I don't know if you remember this, Hawk, from New England, but I will give Belichick credit for this. Now, Belichick's a fascinating case study in leadership because anytime I do like a speaking engagement, they'll always ask about Belichick. I don't know if you were there long enough, Hawk, but it's 100% negative reinforcement.
Yes.
I mean, Dan, Stugotz, the first thing they do at 8 a.m. every day is show the 5 worst plays from practice the day before. And Belichick just makes fun of whoever messed up.
Yeah.
So your motivation there is to not be on one of those 5 plays.
Terrible.
But
it's
coaching, Dan. It's coaching.
You think about it the entire practice, too. Like, don't mess up. Don't get on BillTube. And you know who gets it the worst? Tom Brady.
Right.
Oh, he was pissed. He was pissed. I'm sorry to cut you off, Ross. The exact quote Bill said was, defense, safeties, I told you need to be off the hashes in cover 2. Luckily, we don't have a quarterback who can hit the broadside of a barn. Otherwise, this would have been a touchdown. It was Tom Brady he was talking about. This is like year 15.
You know what I thought was interesting? To Dan's point, if I can't remember where the sign was, but at one time it said that they have 2 signs. One was like availability is more important than ability. And that's in the training room, right? So like you're in the training room.
So get out of the training room.
Get out of here. And then the other thing is consistency is more important than ability or something like that.
Yep.
Like if you suck at pass blocking, okay, like I probably did, they just want like whatever you're good at, be good at that. Whatever you suck at that because in their mind they can coach around that, right? Like they can. But if you're sometimes a good run blocker and sometimes not, they can't coach around that.
Mm-hmm.
So what they want more than anything else is they want players that are consistent because they believe that they can put you in position to only have to do the thing that they know you're good at and not do the thing that they know you stink at. I thought that I never heard 5 teams, all those coaches, nobody else ever said that. Like, just do what you do. Be consistent. We can coach around your weaknesses.
This bummed me out, though. It made me feel a bit bleak that Andrew has told us before that he gets to the Patriots and he realizes while working out with another young person that young person wants it more than he does, cares more, has a hunger. And then the first 5 things that happen in your morning is Bill Belichick being negative, and you look over there in the banquet hall through a walkthrough and Tom Brady's taking a 1 hour of imaginary snaps. And you're like, bleep this, I don't want to do it anymore.
There was a time in my life where that would have got my juices going, man. That would have, I'd have been in there talking like Macho Man Randy Savage. Let's get to it, yeah.
You got to him too late.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, it's too late. I missed this window of spending an hour in the corner doing things that I did my freshman year in college.
Ross, can you tell us, because this is you tickled Stugotz. Stugotz, I'm sorry that we haven't gotten to this earlier, but you said something that Stugotz stood up, his eyes got real big, and he got very excited.
You were talking about tiers, and no one loves talking about tiers more than I do, but you had the Dolphins in the second tier in the NFL, or the AFC, I think, and I'm wondering... I want to know the tier inside the tier. Like, where are they? Ahead of the Ravens, the Titans?
What are the tiers?
Are they at top of the second tier? Where are they?
What's the first tier?
So those are the 3 in the second tier. But I do power rankings every Tuesday on the Ross Tucker podcast. And second tier, I'm going to go Ravens, Dolphins, Titans. So you're in the middle of you're smack dab in the middle of the second tier is the Dolphins, because the Ravens made a big move too. The Ravens got Roquan Smith from the Bears. It's interesting that
that'd be great if he could play wide receiver. I mean,
well, and you know what too? The in the NFC, the only team in the top tier over there in my mind is the Eagles, but then the second tier, like the Vikings, they got Hawkinson from the Lions. So what yesterday basically was a bunch of tier 2 teams being like, you know what? Maybe if we get this one guy, maybe we can be good enough in the playoffs in January to win a couple games and do some damage, maybe even get to the Super Bowl.
Is there such a thing as a piece away? Like, is that a thing?
I played for the Browns, Dan. I don't know.
Odell Beckham. You're always several pieces away. You're right, Hog.
Yeah. I don't. What the hell would I know?
Okay, fair
no
enough.
idea.
Ross,
by the way, Dan,
I've read about it in books.
Dan, to Hawk's point, I got traded from the Patriots to the Browns, like during training camp. So the Patriots had won 3 straight Super Bowls, and I'm out there at training camp. And they don't put me in for the last period of practice. They put the other guy in. I'm like, that's weird. And I asked Scarnecchia right after practice. He says, Tuck, evidently we just traded you to Cleveland. And I had already been cut 3 times in my career. So getting traded sounded amazing. I was like, I said, somebody traded for me? I said, what'd they trade? What'd they give up? And he said, probably a bag of balls.
Marriott rewards points.
Yeah, so then I went in and I was in the cold tub with Brady and like Larry Izzo. And Izzo had heard I got traded because I knew I was going to be starting for Cleveland like in the next game because they had like LaCharles Bentley tore his knee up. So I'm in the cold tub and Izzo's like, what, are you going to piss in the cold tub before you leave? because he knew I was going to Cleveland. So I'll never forget, like, the guys in the cold tub, like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I just got traded to Cleveland. And Brady and all the guys were like, wow, man, that sucks. I mean, I went from literally the best team to the worst team. And what people don't understand about football is I was thrilled. In New England, I was battling to be one of the backups. In a second, I got traded to Cleveland, and I was their starting center. So, like, people, this would blow people's mind, but I was ecstatic that I got traded from the Patriots, the best team, to the Browns, the worst team, because that was the best move for me in my independent contractor NFL employee career.
Yes, in the business of Ross Tucker. The opposite of that is Joe Thomas. When I was in Cleveland, the Broncos were trying to trade for him the year they won the Super Bowl. And the whole day, Joe Thomas was, I'm talking about like close to tears all day because he did not want to leave Cleveland. Ultimately, the GM waited to the 4 p.m. deadline because he didn't want his legacy in Cleveland to be the guy that traded away Joe Thomas. But I'm like, Joe, you could have won a Super Bowl, but he was so like Cleveland, he didn't want to do it.
The one guy who wanted to stay.
He did not want to leave Cleveland. He was like devastated all day. Didn't say a word to anybody. Wasn't out to practice. Didn't eat lunch. Like you could see it in his face. And I had been there a couple of years, and I thought that was crazy because I'm like, Peyton Manning is calling you, asking you to go take a leak on the GM's desk just to get you there to win a Super Bowl. And he's like, nah, man, I'm Cleveland. So,
Ross, what did you get traded for?
The highest honor that any NFL player can receive, Dan, a conditional 7th-round pick, which is the lowest thing an NFL team can actually trade. Anytime a guy gets traded for a conditional 7th-round pick, I welcome him to the club. And by the way, the best part of the story is I go to Cleveland, I start the next 3 preseason games at center. On final cut day, they trade for Hank Fraley and cut me because they think Hank's better than me. So the Patriots didn't even get the 7th-round pick. The condition was not exercised.
They didn't want it, Ross.
The Ross Tucker Football Podcast presented by DraftKings, wherever it is you get your podcast. Thank you, Russ. We appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. You guys are a blast. Love listening to you. Thanks for having me.